Well, here we are looking at another case this week, which is frankly um, maybe not all that important. I like it though for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's a fourth canon case that doesn't have to do with anything whistleblowing, supposed tension between the first canon and the fourth canon. It's kind of a pure fourth canon case about rights, responsibilities to clients, which is, sort of supposed to be classical professional ethics. But because so few engineers have clients, they have employers who have customers, but they don't have clients personally. It's a kind of an interesting paradigmatic case that maybe is more rare than one might expect. And I like it for that reason. I also like it because it has to do, it is about trivialities to a certain extent. It's about returning phone calls and emails. And maybe the third reason I like it is because it goes to the notion of professionalism in a way that I think is interesting too. An engineer doesn't return phone calls and emails, and for a long time from a client. What is the issue here? The question: was it unethical for the engineer to fail to respond for such a period, a 3 week period? And I don't think it's any surprise that they would say that it is unethical or it was unethical, which is the conclusion. It was unethical. The fact that it did cause some damage, financial damage to the client, is frankly immaterial, right? If it's wrong not to get back to a client for 3 weeks, it's wrong, whether it causes damage to them or not. So I think that that's a red herring in the discussion. It's not really important. The question is, how do you treat your clients as a professional? Maybe I also like the case because it makes me think about myself. I mean, I don't consider myself a professional as a teacher, but on the other hand, I know that I'm really bad about returning emails and phone calls. I'm not. It's not my thing, man. And the question is, of course, that's probably not best. It's not really good. It would be better if you promptly returned important emails and phone calls. But how bad is it? I mean, does it rise to the level of an ethical lapse? Is my question. And that's an interesting point. I mean, if we were talking about a pure business ethics case, I think the answer would clearly be no, at least to my mind. That is, if we were just talking about business and we're talking about business associates, people doing business with each other, and even customers, if you're providing a service, a plumber, a car mechanic, somebody who works at J.C. Penney's, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if ever not getting back to somebody would be considered unethical. Here, it's important to make the distinction between something being unethical and something being imprudent. That is, something can be merely imprudent in the sense that it's not smart to do. That is, if you're in business with anybody and you're in the habit of not promptly returning messages, you're probably not going to do very well in that business. It's not prudent to do it. It's not wise or practical to engage in that kind of negligence, I suppose. But I don't think it's unethical. I would say that this is a kind of a pure professional ethics case in the sense that things that are merely imprudent on the part done by non-professionals can rise to the level of ethical lapses if done by professionals. There is a special relationship that professionals have with their clients. Their duties to their clients, presumably, are more stringent. I mean, they have actual duties to their clients. Imagine a doctor not getting back to a patient for 3 weeks. Imagine a lawyer not getting back to a client for 3 weeks. If we do take the claim on the part of engineering to be a profession seriously, then I suppose we have to really say, well, I mean, it's just as bad. I mean, an engineer does something important, and to neglect to communicate with a client for that long is a breach of the relationship, breach of the duties that go along with the relationship. Once you agree to be somebody's engineer, Once you agree to be somebody's doctor, once you agree to be somebody's lawyer, you then have taken upon yourself a certain responsibility for that person's welfare. And what in other contexts may be merely lazy or bad business rises to the level of an ethical lapse. So I think it's an interesting case. I mean, they cite an earlier case in which the failure to 78-6, in which the failure to communicate something to a client is, I would say, a much greater ethical lapse because it rises to the level of a deception. This does not. This is merely ignoring a client for an unreasonable amount of time. It's interesting. It does bring up something really essential about the professional client relationship. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The last thing I'd like to say is that it is interesting that about a matter which, I suppose, viewed in one way is fairly trivial, not returning messages, that the BER is much quicker to assert that the engineer is in violation of a certain duty than I would say a lot of first canon cases. What I mean to say is that it does indicate that, at least in their disposition, the BER, to decide cases, they're much harder on engineers who fail to, on the face of it, live up to their duties to clients than they are to engineers who, on the face of it, might fail to live up to the duties of the public. But that's just a certain suggestion. I don't know. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that the BER can be very conservative about saying that the engineer has a duty to do this or that for the public, especially if it goes against the wishes of their employer or client. Whereas they're much quicker to assert that you failed in relation to your client. So I don't know. It's an interesting trend if you read a lot of these cases. But I would say, in this case, an interesting case. I mean, maybe about something that's not that important, but it's okay. It can be revelatory if it's not important.